Good afternoon again. And remember, as I said in the first video that I posted about the liquidation store and their disrespect, um, I'm saying the same thing. If the phone happens to ring, this will be a two-parter. There's nothing I can do to avoid that. Hopefully, it will not ring. Okay, so this is the pre-story video. And as you know, it's Wednesday, so Wednesday. If I have a pre-story video to record, it will be on Wednesday, and then the story video will come out on Sunday. Now, keep in mind, next week we may not have. I know we're not going to have a pre-story next week. We'll go right back into the story, and hopefully, since the surgery takes place next Tuesday, hopefully I'll feel well enough on Sunday to continue with this story. This is going to be the pre-story is going to be an introduction to my mother, her background, and all that good stuff. And then we're going to get into the story of my caregiving journey, which lasted 7 years after her stroke. And so, but I want to kind of introduce you to her and also let you know, a little of her background from childhood, birth, and all that. So I'm going to introduce you to my mother, her parents, my brother, because I decided I'm going to tie my brother's story into my mother's story, but his part of the story will come later. This is going to be a mini series. I don't know how long it's going to last because we're looking at a 7-year journey with my mother. And then so much happened during that 7-year journey. We've got to tie my brother into it. And so therefore, or my late brother into it. So I know it's going to have at least 4 parts. So over the next month here. And then my mother's birthday would have been March 17th. Her birthday. And then she was birthday buddies with my nephew, my sister's oldest child. They were birthday buddies. They were both born on St. Patrick's Day. So anyway, I just wanted to mention that. So we're going to start it off. Now, what I'm going to do is, because so much happened and it's so much to the story, I have to include my father, my late father as well. Because what I want to explain to you, technically, I'll just put it this way, we're tarnished. My sister and I, from my original family, now let me explain. My mother and father married, and so my brother, he had already been born, so she had how old was my brother? Yeah, he was 9 months old or something, somewhere around there when she and my father married. And then my father had 2 older daughters previously when they married. So I have 2 older sisters, but we were not raised together or anything. And both of my older sisters, one is 9 years older than me, and my other sister is 8 years older than me. We know each other well. We're close. We're family. But basically, as far as us growing up together and everything, we didn't. In fact, my oldest sister, I didn't find out that she was my sister until I was an adult. I was 18. And she babysat us when I was a baby. And we were always close because her grandmother lived across the street. She's the one who taught me the crochet pointers and everything, her grandmother. And so I've known her all my life. She babysat us, and it wasn't until I was 18 when I found out that she was actually my sister through my father. I don't believe in half sister and all this other stuff. You're either a brother or you're a sister. It's just that simple. Okay, and then my other sister, Linda, she's the one who's 8 years older than me. She has a different mother. So just to kind of tie it in. So basically, although I say my sister, Sherry, and I, we're the only 2 who have the same 2 parents. And so basically, she and I are the only 2, she and I are the only 2 left. And so from our original family, the family I grew up with was my mother, my father, my oldest brother, who's now deceased, and my sister, who's a year old. And we were stair steps. My brother was, he would be 63 now. No, yeah, he would be 63. My sister will be 62 in April, and I'll be 61 in July. So we're stair steps until November, from July to November. So we were stair steps, and my mother was like, I was fertile myrtle, and I got the tubes tied after you. Good, okay. But anyway, so anyway, this is my father. Now, he passed away January 19th of 2000. He passed away on my very first day of college. I went to college at the age of 38, and that's another story. I mean, the age of 36. I keep saying 38, but I think I was 36. Wait, I was born in 64, 74, 84, 94, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 2000. Yep, I was 36. So I went to college at 36 for the first time, and I'm not even going to get into that. But anyway, my father passed away. As you see, January 19th, 2000, that was my very first day of college ever. And this picture was taken. This is a picture of me. It was my ID picture that was taken on the day that he died. Happiest day of my life. Never knew it would become the worst day of my life. And it was my first day. So this is the picture that was taken 3 hours before I found out that he had passed away. So look at the happiness. Okay. That's it. So that was me at the age of 36. So I put that to be a little thorough with everything. So his death was the first one from my what I'm calling my original family. The second death occurred, here it comes, was my brother. And so he passed away suddenly. I told you that he battled colon cancer, but how he actually passed away was his cancer had returned, and he had gone on the experimental drug. And if you all remember, the late Jimmy Carter, at the time, he had been diagnosed with an incurable cancer at that time, and they used an experimental drug on him that worked very well. In fact, President Carter just passed away, a month ago or 2 months ago? Well, my brother went on that same drug. It had not been FDA approved. My brother was the sixth death related to that drug, and that drug was never put on the market because of that. My brother's death was number 6. When he passed away, all the important people showed up at the hospital before they even sent him to the funeral home, because what happened was he took the pill, and a few minutes later it stopped his heart. So basically his death was due to a heart attack. He had just turned 54 years old. So I'm introducing you to my brother. This is him. So he was born in 61 and he passed away in 2015. Oh, it didn't even have his death date and all that. But he was born in November of 1961 and he passed away in December of 2015. Right after Christmas, 2 days after. No. His funeral's 2 days after. He died the 21st. No, he died the 19th of December, exactly 1 month before my father's death date. Okay, and then his funeral was on the 27th of that year. Okay, so then we had the death of my mother. Now, my mother's was the only death that was expected. She was in hospice because after the stroke, her kidneys had failed, and then her port. I knew the doctor had told me the manner of which she would die 4 years before she died, and she died in that exact manner. They could never get a permanent port in her because the stroke arm was deemed, they could not use that arm, and her right arm had so much scar tissue they could not get a port in. So she rolled those 7 years of dialysis with an ash cath in her chest. They would get infected all the time, so they always had to move from one side to the other. Sometimes they would have to go into the leg. It went on, and her doctor said, eventually we're going to run out of space to put an ash cath because the scar tissue keeps building up and it keeps getting harder and harder. He says, so when she passes, it's not going to be because of, complications from the stroke and stuff. He said it's going to be because of the ash cath. And so it got to that point. And right during the pandemic at that, they attempted that last ash cath in her groin and they could not find a spot, could not hit the spot. And so they had to suspend her dialysis. That was heartbreaking. And she had to go on hospice that very day. But she ended up living 40 days. They said that she would pass away peacefully in her sleep within 8 days of that, but she lived approximately 40 days beyond that. And when we got into the month of July, I was like, God, please let her die. I said, I know she's going to pass this month. I said, but because it got to the point where she was just asleep all the time. I said, but please don't let it be on my birthday. And we were getting closer and closer. She died 3 days before my birthday. She died on the 11th, and my birthday is the 14th. So anyway, meet my mother. So this was an older picture of her, and this is her younger picture. This is her senior picture from high school. And so that's my mother. And her name was Mary Carolyn Ruth. And so as I tell her story, you go to find out how she got the name Mary Carolyn Ruth, okay? Her mother did not name her. Okay, so now, so my brother's death was what we considered tragic. My father's death was sudden. My brother's death was sudden. Well, my brother-in-law's death, I'm adding him to this because he passed away 2 years ago on February the 7th. He passed, and his birthday was in January, the same year as my brother. He was born the same year as my brother. This is my sister's husband. And I told you, I'm not going to be explaining his story or anything, but we was not expecting his death. It happened suddenly 2 years ago. So my other set of nieces and nephews lost their father at a young age. And then my brother, he had a son and a daughter. They lost their father at an early age too. And they were all pretty much tragic. So as I told you, he was electrocuted on the job. So that's ongoing. But anyway, I will not be saying anything more about my brother-in-law because that was my sister's husband. But just to kind of give you an idea of what we went through as far as losing everyone in our family, my sister and I are the only two left. And then we have, of course, my nieces and nephews. Now, my older sisters, they have children. In fact, I have great and great greats and all that stuff through them. But as far as my original family, as I call it, all that's left are my sister and I, and then my brothers two, and then my sister's three. She has 2 boys and she has a daughter. And then my brother's daughter, she had a baby. He turned 2 on February the 25th. In fact, she went into labor early and all that because my brother-in-law had just died a week before. So she had him a week after he passed because he was due in March. And we were hoping he would come on my mother's birthday. That would have been great. But it didn't happen that way. He ended up being born a little bit early. And we call him Nugget. So that's my great nephew. So that's it for us. Little Nugget, my niece and nephew, and then my other niece and 2 nephews, and then my sister and I. So we're the little matriarchs. In fact, on my mother's side of her family, my sister is the actual matriarch. She's the oldest living one relative from my mother's side of the family. Now we're getting into that as far as the pre-story. Now I'm going to introduce you to my mother's parents, and then I'm going to explain to you about my mother's family, the reason why her family is so small. First of all, my grandfather, he was an only child. His mother, his grandmother, which was my mother's great-grandmother, she was a full-blooded, I guess the word to say, I'm trying to be politically correct here. My mother always said full-blooded Indian, but I know that's not the correct term. I think isn't it Native American? But she was full-blooded, okay, 100%. And then his mother was part Native American. We'll just say Native American. I'm trying to listen, y'all. If I come across wrong, because I did a post the other day where I needed to apologize because I did say something when I thought about it and it was brought to my attention. It could have been deemed as offensive, and I apologize for it, and I'm apologizing again. So if I say something that does not, sound politically correct, believe me. And y'all know, because y'all go through it more than we do, okay? Because of the simple fact, sometimes we say things that are no longer said, and it comes with age and whatnot, but take no offense. Okay, so this is my grandmother and grandfather. Okay, my grandfather, he was part Native American, and then my grandmother, I'm going to explain about her. Her father was 100% Caucasian. Her mother was a former slave, and her mother was 25% black and then 75% white or Caucasian. Okay? So my mother's mother, she came from a family of 10, she had 10 siblings. Okay? Everyone but she and her sister, because they were an array of colors. In fact, my mother and all the pictures of her mother were black and white, so you could not tell. She said her mother had pure blue eyes. And believe me, now I'm dark, which is all right, but I have cousins. I have cousins with green eyes. I have cousins with blonde hair. It's a little nappier. We are just an array of all different shades on my mother's side. And so her mother, her siblings, all but one, but she and her sister, and I'm going to show you her picture too next, they all decided to go into the white race. So you've heard of the term passing, and my grandmother and her sister hated it, because when their siblings did that, I guess after the death of the parents or whatever, they never saw them again. So because of my grandfather being an only child, he did have a sister who died in infancy, but he was an only child. As an only child, you're not going to, your family isn't going to build up. And then my grandmother, because of she and her sister losing all of their siblings, and my mother says she described it as like a death, because she never saw them again after that. Never, ever. She didn't know what became of them. Obviously, they probably went on, and whatnot, but she hated that, and she did not want to do it, and she did not do it, and her sister chose not to do it. And they looked more black, basically, because they had darker hair, but even if they could have, she said she would not have done it. And then my grandmother, she was married once before my mother was born, and she had 2 sons. One died in infancy, and then her other son, which we knew, because he moved to Detroit. He moved away from Oklahoma and moved to Detroit. Well, guess what he decided to do when he moved to Detroit? Because he looked white, and he decided to pass. So my grandmother, she didn't know this. She took a trip to Detroit, and he took her up to his job and stuff and all this stuff, because he figured, hey, they're not going to question anything. She outed him. He lost that job. And this was back in the either late 40s or early 50s. She outed him. She was so mad, and she told him she'd kill him if she if she found out he did that again. And he never did it again. He never did it. In fact, he ended up getting married a second time. And the second time he married a black woman, and they had children. And of course, they came out an array of colors and all this stuff. I know I'm getting into a sensitive subject here, but it's just our family history. So I wanted to explain that to you before I introduce you to my grandmother and grandfather. So here they are. Now, my grandfather, I knew him. He died the day after my 8th birthday. And I remember him very well. We would go to see him in Oklahoma. My mother's mother, she was actually 44 years old when she had my mother. Her oldest brother, the one who decided to pass and got outed, he was 21 years older than her. And then my other 2 uncles, who had the same father as my mother, they were quite a bit older than my mother too. One brother was like 8 years older, and the other one was 6 years older. My mother was the oops, surprise baby, and her mother was 44 years old. And so my mother was born premature, and they didn't think she would live, but she survived her birth. And so these are her parents. So her mother, I don't know how old she was on this picture, but she was 44 when my mother was born. And she ended up dying because she had, In fact, when my mother was born, her mother had suffered a heart attack at an early age. And my mother, she was born prematurely after that. And they didn't think either one would live, but they both survived it. But her mother did eventually pass away she passed away when my mother was 20. My mother had just turned 20 and her mother passed away. But her father lived to be a ripe old age. And like I said, he passed away a day after my 8th birthday. And so that's them. And so I remember my grandfather, he had very light brown eyes, and everything. And he was very, very handsome. And then, of course, her mother, she was beautiful too, I think. And so that's her. And now here is her sister, her name was Miss Mattie. And I'll explain something about her. Her name was Mattie Little. Little. This is my grandmother's sister. She was the other one who chose not to pass. Now, I don't know if you're older, you might remember the name Cleavon Little. He was an actor. And he starred, his claim to fame was the movie Pearlie, Grease Lightning, and he starred in another movie too. I forgot the name of it, but Grease Lightning and Blazing Saddles. He starred in those 3 movies, and that's how he was basically known, although he was in a lot of other things and TV, but he was a very famous actor. He's deceased now. He passed away in 1991. That was his grandmother. Okay, so my mother and Cleavon Little were first cousins. And my mother actually lived with them when she went to college in San Diego, California, back in the early 50s. She went to college, and then when her mother got real sick when she was like in her 2nd year, and she had to return home to care for her mother, and then her mother passed away the following year. So that's just a little history. Okay, so that's how my mother's life started. Okay, so now that's going to end this video. I just wanted to give you the background history and introduce you to my mother and then her family, where she comes from and that history. And so we're going to end it here. That's the pre-story. And so we will start with the stroke. We'll touch on a little bit of my childhood and everything, with my mother and everything. But the main story is going to be about her stroke and our caregiving journey. So I hope that I wasn't all over the place with this video. We're at 22 minutes, so I think I did much better. But this is going to be a mini series, so we're just going to try to keep it at 22 minutes or less, or 20 minutes or less for each video, when I explain, the everything, about my mom. So anyway, we're going to end this here. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please like it if you don't mind. If you want to ask questions or comment, you can. Thank you all for requesting the stories. And hey, I'm willing to tell them. So I will talk to you guys later. And may God bless you all. Bye-bye.